Hello everyone, I am the storyteller, and tonight I am here just to help you relax, to drift off to sleep by the sound of the waves, like the whispers of old souls. I know you have come to this video not just to hear the story, but also to find a deep, peaceful sleep. But before we begin, please gently like the video and subscribe to the channel so I can continue to tell you strange stories under the dim moonlight. Where are you from? And what time is it where you live? Just relax. Let your body relax. Put all your worries down by your pillow. Let me take you into a world of mysteries where the wind and the waves mingle, and unsolved mysteries are waiting to be told. Are you ready? Forever haunted. I know. I have to run. Get away. But as yet, haven't the courage. I am in the corner, huddled, naked. I'm more colorful than any clothes I could wear. I'm red, black, purple, and blue, battered and bruised, my crime inquiring about his whereabouts. Together for 6 years now, our beautiful son asleep upstairs, and I'm not entitled, according to him, to ask him anything. I am not and never will be the boss of him. I'm replaying my actions and conversation over and over again. He's never raised his hand to me before. Verbal abuse, yes. Threats, yes. But never until now, connection physically. I realize this didn't just spring up out of nowhere. For weeks now, it's been building money worries, new baby, never having lived together before. He can't handle it. He can't even handle the thought of being a dad. He acts as if he hates him. I believe he's jealous of him. Maybe it's just a one-off, I tell myself. I wipe my nose, and my hands are covered in snot, tears, and blood. I have to get up. I have got a baby to look after. He can't see me like this. I need to shower. I can wash away the blood, but never will I be able to wash away the shock and fear I felt. He hasn't gone near me since the birth, and last night, with the first punch, his erection appeared. It grew the more he hit me. The names he called me, the force he used. I can't tell my parents. They didn't want me to move in with him in the first place. I'm 19. I had told them. An adult and a new mom with a fella that adores me. I'll be fine. How can I now go back and tell them they were right? It's now 4 months on and middle of summer, and I'm clad in a woolly, oversized sweater which hides a multitude. He's got clever and hits me in places which can be hidden from everyone. But he doesn't hide his beatings from his son. In fact, I think he waits until he's asleep in my lap sometimes to start. He knows I'm more afraid of him hurting him than me. Yesterday, something in me snapped. I'm not taking anymore. My son's not taking it anymore. We both deserve better. In walks the oppressor. I usually sit, waiting to suss out his mood before I do anything, but not today. I carry on reading a book. Paul's asleep in his cot, oblivious. He glares at me, walks into the kitchen, and comes storming back. Where's my tea? You know what time I get in at, and my tea and dinner should be already prepared, sitting on the table, waiting for me. Paul and I have already eaten, and since the last time I prepared food, it ended up all over me. And the kitchen, I've decided I won't be doing that anymore. His face is incredulous. In any other situation, it would be hilarious, actually. Even now, it's hilarious. I start to giggle and can't stop. Nothing could have stopped it. Have you finally lost the plot? Stupid bitch. What's funny? I stand up and ask him, for once, can we take our fight into a different room and let the baby sleep in peace? I start walking before he gets a chance to respond. He comes in, arm raised, and stops midair as he catches sight of the carving knife in my hand. I slice and only succeed in ripping his shirt. He starts apologizing, the only time since the first time. Tells me he loves me. He'll never hit me again. I can feel my resolve breaking and need to get to my son. I start walking, and he grabs me. The knife clatters to the floor. I knew there and then I was going to pay for this. Big time. He goes in and wakes up. Paul puts the disturbed toddler in his walking chair and hands him the knife. I beg him to take it off him, but he walks over to me and spits in my face. I tell him I'll do anything he wants, that I love him, but just take the knife off the baby. He pushes me on my knees and makes me go on all fours and rapes me while my son gurgles and plays with the knife. Not a scream or whimper do I make, but hum and make soothing noises so Paul won't get alarmed. When he's finished, he gets up and urinates on me and Paul. I've never known such hate and haven't experienced it on the same level since. When he leaves the next day, I pack up all his stuff and our stuff. I ring my parents and beg them to get me out of there and plead with them. Can I come home? I hear my mother sobbing in the background, and my dad says, "Darling, we've been dying for this call. It killed us the last time when you asked us to leave and not come back. We'll be there right away." I never told them about the rapes, too ashamed. But the latest beatings were obvious. You only had to look at me. The drive home is terrifying and soothing at the same time. I knew I'd done too much growing up. I could never go back to the girl that lived with Mammy and Daddy again. I wasn't the same girl. He killed himself in a prison cell. I didn't send him there. It was an awful crime committed on someone else. It was a twisted relief, knowing Paul would never have to see him, and a twisted sadness because he'd been my first love. And for a long time, I adored him. Time and life move on. Scars heal. Hope returns. But your past is always your past, and a part of me will be haunted forever. Past Imperfect W. Mentions of mental and physical abuse. Bill sat bolt upright in the hotel bed, heart pounding to a familiar refrain. The dream had reasserted itself with a vengeance from the moment he'd seen the updated list of people attending the conference. One name had stood out. Dake Scratchard was the name of the boy who'd haunted Bill Brown's life more years than he cared to remember. Dreams fueled by past memories disturbed his nights when equal amounts of dread and fear surged through his veins, rendering him helpless. As always, the nightmare was a variation on a theme. In it, Bill was a teenage boy running from the gang. He often came close to evading capture, but at the last minute tripped over his shoelaces or some other encumbrance. Then he found himself falling flat on his face outside the old school toilets, the inner doors of which rose up like whited sepulchres. Up close, he could see every cell of his tormentor's face. Ginger needs to be taught a lesson, came out of that hate-filled mouth. A bully, aided by his contemptible band of followers, with their menacing chants of Ginger, Ginger, Ginger. Even now, their words filled the corridors of his mind like a background hiss. No! The sound seemed to come from somewhere outside, as if it belonged to someone else. Not him. You're just begging for it, Billy Ginger. If the teachers won't correct you, we must do it for them. Billy knew no teacher would come. They were never there when you needed them. In any case, the gang always had some lackey watching out. Soon they'd have him crawling on his hands and knees, scooting about like an insect, while they kicked him on the hard stone floor, their mocking jeers running through him. He was nothing more than a piece of meat to be hauled about. For them, the high point was shoving his face into the toilet bowl. The stench was the least of it. Clinging for support, he tried to keep everything tight shut while they flushed. Knowing he could not hold out for long, he spluttered to be let go. Then, just as he was about to give up, a final flush signaled his release. He was pulled up, squirming like a rat from a sewer, and left heaving on the floor. For a few minutes, he lay there curled and defenseless, all resistance gone, until the next time, and the time after that. Something so primal, so feral. He could smell it now, even after all this time. He was defined by it, as if the abuse had become part of a warped pattern of D and A, making him only half human. But somehow, he'd known he was worth more than that. At least his dog seemed to think so. Through it all, the only thing that kept Bill going was the thought of the black Labrador faithfully waiting in the porch. Back home, Kelpie licked away the wounds and salt tears, stayed beside him till the pain subsided. Without Kelpie, he would not have survived, for the purity of a dog's heart knows no bounds. Switching on the bedside lamp, Bill waited until his breathing steadied. Coughing, he climbed into a dressing gown and stepped out onto a small balcony. In the courtyard below, the air was prescient with a damp chill. A few lone trees were scattering leaves marking the onset of winter. Inhaling a sneaky cigarette, Bill considered his options. It had all happened so long ago, yet the dream had reignited the past, making him feel he could never escape its clutches. If Bill recited the facts of his life enough times, he almost convinced himself of their worth. On paper, he'd worked hard, got married and divorced, and had a son he barely saw. He'd mostly married his wife to please his father because she came from a better background, and look where that had got him. It wasn't his ex's fault if along the way he'd supplemented whatever was missing with a few women he was physically attracted to, but not much else. In the end, it had been like ships passing in the night, all except for Bella. With her, he'd come close to casting a loveless marriage aside. But in the end, something had stopped him. The risk of getting it wrong had been too great, but all that was in the past. Although Bella had recently returned to the company where they both worked, albeit in a less demanding role, he rarely saw her these days. And according to rumors, she was now with someone in the shower. Bill imagined washing the past down the plug hole. Soon he planned to do just that. The only fly in the ointment, of course, was Bella. He wasn't sure whether she'd be attending the conference. Really, bumping into her was the least of his worries. But if he did, so be it. He hadn't actually seen her name on the list of attendees, so it seemed unlikely. Overall, it would be easier if she didn't attend, because that afternoon, Bill was making his first big speech in his new role as Regional Operations Manager. As if there wasn't enough going on without having to deal with affairs of the heart. The speech, eagerly anticipated, was expected to be the highlight of the day. In the hotel room, examining the set of knives his father had given him as an 18th birthday present, Bill was confronted by powerful emotions. Before him were a dazzling array of sharp pieces, all with wooden handles for an extra firm grip. It was almost pleasurable selecting the one with the pointed end. He carefully placed it in a sheath and adding it to a concealed section of his briefcase. In the mirror, he observed hair that was thinning a little at the sides. Other than that, it was still thick and brown, with just a hint of chestnut. Impressive in a well-cut suit, he was tall enough to be considered distinguished. To some, his features might be regarded as handsome. His eyes, however, were preternaturally bright. Sighing deeply, he exited the room. Clutching his laptop and briefcase, he made his way along the plushly carpeted corridor, entered the lift, and headed the 3 floors down to the conference room area. Psyching himself up for whatever lay ahead, he focused on his achievements. Only by drawing on every retail milestone was he able to make sense of the wasteland that was his emotional life. His mind's eye framed the certificates that took pride of place on his home office wall, charting his journey from sales assistant to the coveted role of regional operations manager for one of the country's most successful chain stores. Stores that sold fashionable clothes and accessories for prices most people could afford. Bill's journey into a better life had only really begun when his parents had moved from a London suburb to a city in the Midlands. Then aged 15, he'd welcomed the move with open arms, for it had given him a chance to start afresh in a place where no one knew him, especially at school. He had loved walking unrecognized through the city's streets and visiting its ancient cathedral. One Saturday morning, plucking up courage, he'd walked into one of the city's department stores and landed himself a Saturday job in the menswear department. When he returned home, his mum made him a cup of tea, and Kelpie wagged a warm greeting. You could do a lot worse. They've got people queuing up to get a place in that store, his mum had commented. Then, examining him more closely, she observed, You've darkened your hair. Isn't that what Elvis Presley did? I expect so. I never liked my natural color, and I want to fit in at this school. That was the closest he'd come to admitting the bullying at his old school. He never told anyone about the suicidal thoughts. He couldn't miss her. Bella was a figure of light breaking the conference room formality and wearing the most distinctive outfit. To him, she was the classiest person there, surrounded as she was by an adoring team of managers at one of the middle tables. Distracted by her presence, he could hardly wait for a chance to speak to her. The chance came while she was lining up to choose from a tray of canapés during the lunch break. I wasn't expecting you to be here, Bella, he said. I wasn't expecting to be here, but there was a change of plan. It's so good to see you, he found himself saying. Well, I missed the company and the people. I wasn't the right fit for the new position, even if it was a promotion. It seemed fortuitous when my old vacancy came up again. So, you didn't have a problem with going back to your old role? There's no need to avoid using the word demotion. I won't be offended, she laughed. I came to realize I didn't need all the hassle that goes with a high-powered job. I realized I'd made a mistake, and the opportunity came to rectify it. I want a simple life, especially now I'm single. Don't worry, it's all worked out for the best. He wasn't right for me either. Bill could hardly believe what he was hearing. It's really good to see you, he said again. I'm glad you think that, she said, smiling brightly. Catching up with Bella had been great. So much so Watching her sleeping the next morning, Bill had almost forgotten about the other thing. He decided he'd know what to do when the time came. If it came, Bill was pouring coffee when Bella opened her eyes. They were warm, like kelpies had once been. "That smells good," she said. "I remembered you like it strong." The world outside remained foggy and damp. But for the moment, none of that mattered. Fully dressed, Bill joined Bella on the bed. "What's the matter? You look like you've got the world on your shoulders," she said kindly. "Nothing. Just the conference. A lot to think about." But that was only partly true. If only he could tell her what was really on his mind. Part of him wondered whether meeting Bella again was purely coincidental or a sign he should let the past go once and for all. He might have said more, but then the phone rang. "Good luck with the speech. Not that you're going to need it," Bella said, getting up and kissing him. "Dad." On the way to the conference room, Bill overheard a conversation between two hotel staff members. "Are the cameras still out?" "Only on the 3rd floor. Also, the ones by the bathroom. They're down, too." "Okay, not good. How long before they are fixed?" "A few hours at most. Maintenance will get it sorted. It won't affect the general running of things." Bill felt almost disappointed to hear the news about the cameras. After his night with Bella, he'd been on the verge of scrapping his original plan. Now fate seemed to be pulling him back, yet he still hadn't come across his nemesis. About 40 minutes into the second day of conference, a man best described as nondescript entered the hall. Head down, he weaved his way to the numbered seat. Bill clocked him, and his heart sank. Something of the man's stance reminded him of Dake Scratchard grown older. But was it him? He couldn't be sure. 2 hours into the conference, during the talk on sustainability, the man scurried towards one of the exits, and all doubt vanished. Shriveled he might be, but it was definitely Scratchard, galvanized into action. Bill left his seat and headed for the nearest exit. Gripping his case so tightly his fingers hurt, he followed the figure until he disappeared into the bathroom. Unless he had to, Bill generally avoided public bathrooms. But this was going to be the exception. Adrenaline flooding through him, he quietly opened the door and stepped inside. Other than a pulsing through his ears and the sound of a dripping tap, all was quiet. Then he heard a retching coming from one of the cubicles. A minute later, the door opened and Scratchard stepped out. Engrossed in his own suffering, he ran to the nearest sink and stood there heaving, watching unobserved. Bill was torn between revulsion and an intense hatred. Mostly, he was seized by a hatred for all he'd been put through, overcome by a rage for the way this pathetic being had ruined so much of his life. It was too late to change his mind now. The die was cast. Gripping the knife, he advanced, his anger rising to a peak. Suddenly, the bathroom door sprang open, and to his astonishment, Bella entered. She came and stood behind him, putting her arms round his waist. Then, opening his fist, she carefully removed the knife from his hand and put it behind her back. "It's not the answer," she whispered, hurriedly placing it in her bag. It all seemed to happen in slow motion. The atmosphere in the room shifted. Startled out of his sickness, Bill's childhood enemy locked eyes with his victim in the mirror. Both men were shaking, one from the effects of illness, the other from the horror of what might have been. "What the hell?" Scratchard broke out. Then there was a flash of recognition as the years fell back. "Surely not. I wasn't sure if it was you in the meeting. Probably because your hair is different. But it's Ginger Bill, isn't it? Only the last time I saw you." The words trailed off, vanished into the unknown. "But you never did see me," Bill said through gritted teeth. "All you saw was a weak boy you could bully because of his hair color. As I recall, the last time I saw you and your sick gang, you'd forced my head down the bog. Have you any idea what that does to someone?" "Did I do that?" Dake's face reddened. "I was a bit of a jerk in those days. If it's any consolation, life hasn't exactly treated me well. As you can see, I'm not a well man." The edges blurring, Bill felt the first stirrings of pity. "What's actually wrong with you, Scratchard?" Calling him by his surname felt like a minor victory. He'd never dared call him anything in school. Dake shook his head despairingly. "If it's not one thing, it's another these days. I had heart trouble a few years ago, and now this. I keep having to running to the toilet and have a raging thirst." "You need medical attention," Bella said unexpectedly. "You're showing all the signs of severe diabetes. My father got like that before he was diagnosed." 10 minutes later, Bill was sitting with his childhood tormentor in the lobby, waiting for assistance. "I'm sorry for making your school life hard," Dake muttered, unable to meet Bill's eyes. "It was worse than that. You bullied me to the point I didn't feel life was worth living. Why did you? I need to know," Bill demanded. Dake searched what remained of his soul for answers. "I don't know," he admitted at last. "Maybe it made me feel more in control. Life was miserable at home, and at school, I was somebody in front of the other kids. The rest of the day passed in a blur." But Bill somehow found the strength to get through his talk. He got a good reception at the end, and he couldn't help noticing Bella was clapping the hardest. "What made you come into the bathroom like that?" he asked her much later. "I couldn't believe it. When I saw you there, you kept saying his name in your sleep, saying you're dead over and over. I haven't forgotten the nightmares you had when we were together before. Imagine what would have happened if you hadn't appeared, Bella. It doesn't bear thinking about," she said. "If you want us to make a go of this, you've got to promise me you're going to get help. The past will always get in the way if you don't." It turned out to be an easy promise to keep. More than a year after that fateful encounter, the terrible dreams are a thing of the past. though his old enemy is hardly on Bill's Christmas card list. He no longer regards him as a threat. Now Bill dreams of walking through the park with Bella, taking it in turns to throw a ball for their new dog. Somehow, he feels very close to achieving it. Dig deep. Other than a faint glow coming from one of the back rooms, the town's charity shop was in darkness, its front door firmly closed. Although it had opened in 1985, the building had been used commercially since the 1800s, when it had variously been a pharmacy, a bank, and a tavern. The shop was close to the river in Marpleton, a pleasant English market town which had once been home to a nearby priory. In ancient times, monks had wandered back and forth to sell their wares at a market which still existed in diminished form across the road. Regulars were now peering through the shop window, but the main lights stayed off. A few of the shop's helpers were huddled in the back room. Patrick, the treasurer, had collected the spare keys from the greengrocer to let them in. The gatherers were addressing one topic, namely, why their long-serving manager, Rhea, had failed to open up the day before. I just can't understand it, Ivy, one of the shop's founding members, said. I've never known her not to turn up, unless she's on holiday. In all the years I've known Rhea, she's never had a day's sickness. Wasn't she going to New Zealand to visit her sister? Patrick asked. She was, but not until the following week. It's in the shop diary. Here, take a look. Ivy tapped the relevant pages meaningfully. I'm not doubting you, Ivy, but she may have got the dates wrong. She wasn't in the habit of making mistakes. Ivy's loyalty knew no bounds. Patrick adopted a different approach. You've tried Rhea's landline, I take it, several times. Each time, it went straight to answer phone. Right. Still, I expect we're worrying over nothing. But you have to admit, she has been a bit distracted lately, someone piped up. Patrick turned to Silvana hopefully, but she shook her head. I've tried her on her mobile, but nothing. Silvana was a refugee who had joined the shop 2 years earlier. Since Rhea had taken her under her wing when she first came to England, her English had improved markedly. Silvana had been on the verge of admitting her true feelings for Rhea. Reality had crushed the likelihood of her returning to her homeland anytime soon, and been replaced by something entirely unexpected. An overwhelming love for another human being. Silvana's great wish was to know whether that love was returned. Rhea clearly liked her, but was it worth risking their friendship for more? The path to such an admission seemed littered with obstacles. Now, the mystery of Rhea's whereabouts could be added to an already growing list. Dad, did Rhea say anything about changing her holiday plans, Silvana? Patrick asked, determined to get to the bottom of things. No, I went to her house for my lesson last Wednesday. She told me she'd be away all next week. Silvana had considered the matter carefully. Yes, that is so. Patrick said. I guess I'll have to contact the area manager about reopening the shop. You'll need to do that. Volunteer phone numbers are stored in the locked cabinet, and only Rhea has the key, Ivy interjected. Head office have contact numbers too. Everyone knew Rhea always carried a set of keys on a fob attached to a waistband. Patrick joked she secretly had a cellar key for the shop's more trying customers, to which he'd received an enigmatic smile. The actual cellar key had supposedly vanished in the mists of time. Certainly, there was no call to use the cellar with ample storage space elsewhere. In any case, the cellar door was kept permanently locked, preventing anyone getting trapped if there was a fire. Patrick scrutinized the rota sheets. Maybe Judd would be willing to help if we reopen the shop, he suggested. Silvana, who distrusted Judd, said nothing. 3 months earlier, dressed in black jeans and hoodie, and trailed by a mournful cocker spaniel, Judd had shown up to inquire about volunteering. When Silvana had bent to pat his dog, it had backed off, whimpering. She gets nervous round new people, Judd had explained. Tucking away the banking money, Patrick had gone to fetch Rhea. A young man's inquiring about volunteering, he'd told her. Shall I send him through? What's he like? Rhea was wearily tapping information into the computer at her desk. He seems pleasant enough. His dog's rather nervous. Rhea massaged her aching neck. Send him through, she said. Rhea had confided in Silvana about her difficulty in getting references for Judd Dig Deep. Eventually, he'd presented her with 2 typed ones, supposedly from an ex-employer. With typical thoroughness, Rhea had rung one of the numbers to learn more about the new helper. When a voice answered, sounding suspiciously like Judd's, she'd intended to investigate further. However, other things had intervened. A few weeks after this uncharacteristic omission, Judd was indeed proving to be an asset. Willing to turn his hand to anything, it was a relief not having to lift heavy sacks and boxes donated by the public from one end of the shop to the other. With little guidance, Judd had transformed one of the sorting rooms, leaving it immaculate. One evening, when Silvana cycled past the back of the shop, she noticed a group of undesirables hanging with Judd, engrossed in conversation. She hurried past, hoping she hadn't been seen. She raised her concerns to Rhea, who told her it was nothing to worry about, that she'd keep an eye on things, and bafflingly added, I'd rather you didn't mention this to anyone else. The day the shop reopened, without Rhea at the helm, was Silvana's birthday. Patrick invited her to join him later for one of his wife's specials, homemade pizza and pear wine. The food tasted delicious, but she pushed her plate to one side. You're still worried about Rhea, aren't you? Patrick observed. Her cell phone is dead. It's strange. I knocked on her door last night, but still no answer. Patrick got up. I tell you what, I happen to know Rhea's neighbor, Angela, from the book club. She looks after the garden when Rhea goes away. She may well have a spare key. I'm sure there's nothing to worry about. but it wouldn't do any harm to check if everything is all right. Silvana was relieved. That's a great idea. Thanks, Patrick. I've been known to have a few in my time. Come on, get your coat. Let's see if we can solve this mystery. Half an hour later, the pair were standing in Ria's house. The hallway led into an open-plan kitchen diner with gleaming countertops and state-of-the-art gadgets. The smell of coffee lingered invitingly. When Ria's partner, Lindsay, had died 5 years earlier, she'd left her with a generous insurance payout. Silvana sighed, remembering the other day when she and Ria had drawn close over a bottle of wine. Ria had even given her a present, only to be opened on your birthday, she instructed. But beneath the gaiety, she'd been out of sorts. Ria had brushed aside Silvana's offer of help with a brisk, "I'm fine. I'll check down here if you do upstairs," Patrick said, jolting Silvana back to the present. The passport was lying on the bedside table. However, the photograph bore little resemblance to the person Silvana had come to love and admire. Having spent time working for a private detective agency when she was younger, instinct overrode caution, and she began a meticulous search for clues. Predictably, Ria's shop keys were lying on the bedside table. More unexpected was the discovery of another set of keys attached to a ring with a tag labeled "Cellar." "Are you all right?" Patrick called up from the bottom of the staircase. "I'm okay." Silvana tucked the cellar keys into her bag. Then she remembered Ria's present and opened it. She was surprised to find a pay-as-you-go phone, already charged up. "Well," Patrick exclaimed, "did you find anything?" "Just this." She gave him the passport. "That's odd. It appears she never made it to New Zealand after all. Maybe it's time to involve the police." "What? Right now? It is rather late. I doubt they'll want to be disturbed tonight." Patrick thought of the half-opened bottle of wine waiting back home. "I'll act tomorrow morning. Shall I walk you back?" "No need. I can take care of myself," Silvana said firmly. Kaala, the moon was her only companion, as Silvana descended the cellar steps at the back of the shop. With growing unease, she encased her hands in a pair of gloves and took off her shoes. She didn't want anyone to know of her presence. After 3 attempts, the door creaked open, and she was met by a cloying damp, overlaid by something else, something unpleasant. Tensing, she flicked on her phone torch and spotted a narrow corridor with another door at the end. Filled with foreboding, she slowly turned the handle. She smelt the body before she saw it. Wearing the trademark hoodie, the bloating, discolored thing in front of her, could hardly be called human. Judd lay slumped against an upturned table, his eyes staring and opaque. Silvana covered her face with a handkerchief to prevent retching and inspected the scene, noting the bloodied head and smashed vase lying beside it. The blood had pooled and dried, staining the clothes and floor. She was no expert, but if the rotting undertones were anything to go by, death had probably occurred a few days earlier. Even then, horror was blunted by relief. So long as it wasn't Rhea, she had the strength for anything. But where was Rhea? Adjusting to the dimness, Sylvana tried to make sense of her surroundings. Some crudely constructed shelves, filled with storage tubs and packets, lay stacked against one of the walls. The place was obviously some kind of drugs den. Could Judd's death have been the result of a disagreement with other gang members? Sylvana's stomach lurched. What if they turned up and found her? She'd only just locked the cellar door and picked up her shoes when she heard voices on the driveway. Somehow, she managed to scramble behind one of the bins underneath the fire escape. Hardly daring to breathe, she waited until the scuffling feet passed, and the gang disappeared down the cellar steps. Then, she bolted into the night as fast as her trembling legs would carry her. She would decide what to do when she got home. So, halfway across the town's park, muffled ringtones came from her bag. "Sylvana?" The voice was clear as day at the other end of the line. "Rhea, is it really you? Thank God. Are you all right? Where are you calling from? Talk to me. If I tell you, you must keep it to yourself," Rhea said urgently. "Of course. By the way, I have your keys." "The shop keys? The cellar keys? Long story. I have just been down there. I found him. Judd. Dead. It was horrible." Sylvana began to laugh hysterically as the shock kicked in. "You went into the cellar?" Rhea repeated. "Why? I needed to know if you were all right. I was so afraid. I was going to find you, not him. When I saw your passport, I knew you couldn't have gone abroad. That something must have happened. I didn't get the chance. What happened? I will tell you, but not now. Not on the phone. Patrick is planning to go to the police tomorrow about your passport," Rhea asked. "Did you touch anything when you went into the cellar? Did you touch him?" "No." Sylvana's teeth were chattering from shock. "It's cold outside. I was wearing gloves. But what do you know about Judd? Why were you wearing gloves?" "I don't know. I had a bad feeling. I didn't want to be implicated in anything. Back home, I once worked at a detective agency. I learned about not touching crime scenes." "You may want to call the police," Rhea said. "But please, can I ask you not to tell them I got in contact? Or about me giving you the phone? We'll meet soon. That is, if you want to. I'll understand if you don't want anything more to do with me. Of course I want to meet you." It seemed silly pretending now. "It's all I think about." Sylvana's heart flipped when she saw the distant figure standing on the pier below. The matinee performance at the Pavilion Theater was in full swing, and the pier was almost deserted. She came up behind Rhea, patting her on the shoulder. "Hey," Rhea turned, instantly relaxing when she saw her friend. "Hey." Sylvana sank into Rhea's arms. For a long time, the pair embraced. "It's so good to see you," Sylvana said. "Likewise." Rhea glanced round. "Does anyone know you're here?" "No." "And I'm so hungry," Rhea grinned. How about some fish and chips? I'll treat you. You mean the famous English fish and chips? Rhea grinned. I've discovered a great place on the front. She linked arms with Silvana. Come on, let's eat. Then I'll tell you everything. Judd was a bad lot, Rhea admitted later. He was running a drug racket, and I threatened to report him to the police. It doesn't surprise me. But how did you find out? Not long after I joined the shop, I was clearing up one of the back rooms and came across a discarded cabinet. There were 2 sets of cellar keys in it. I never told anyone about them, partly because I didn't want a lot of fuss. I wanted to keep it to myself. Unfortunately, Judd caught me coming up the stairs one evening and demanded to store his things there. I didn't like the way he spoke to me. When I refused, he threatened to torture his dog in front of me. He implied if I didn't comply, I'd be next. His eyes were so cold. For the second time in my life, I felt real fear. There would be time enough to ask about the first time, Silvana thought, clasping Rhea's hand. I'm afraid there's more, Rhea said dully. You probably won't want anything to do with me when you hear the rest. Silvana clutched Rhea's hand more tightly. She'd come too far to be brushed aside. Why don't you let me be the judge of that? She said firmly. Whatever it is, we'll bear it together. You see, I love you. I need you to know that. You do? For a moment, Rhea's face shone. That's a relief, she said, laughing. I thought it was just me. Did you? Silvana laughed too. I may have had my suspicions, but I didn't want to say anything. Oh, I'm so happy, Silvana said. But hold your horses before we get carried away, Rhea warned. Hold my horses? An English expression. It means don't count your chickens. Count my chickens? Silvana, my love, let me finish my story before you say anything. Okay, sorry. Silvana nibbled a stray chip. Rhea was smiling in spite of everything. In the end, I couldn't stand being held to ransom by a bully like Judd. A few days ago, I foolishly decided to confront him in the cellar. He went to grab a knife from the table. There was an old jar on one of the shelves, and as he turned, I smashed it over his head. She shuddered. I couldn't tell you all this, but I made sure you had the phone before I left. I hoped you'd stay in touch. The day after, I headed here, not wanting to be traced. I paid for everything with cash, but surely the police will realize you only acted in self-defense, Silvana insisted. Perhaps I should have gone to them straight away, but I couldn't face it. Rhea's hesitation was palpable, especially considering what? In spite of the warmth between them, Silvana felt a sudden chill, like someone walking over a grave. What aren't you telling me? Rhea's voice broke. I'm terminally ill. At best, I only have months to live. At worst, it will be weeks. I have all the medication I need. I just want to spend my last days in a place with happy memories. I can't believe it. But Silvana knew Rhea was speaking the truth. She tried to disguise her anguish. How long have you known? She whispered. I only found out for certain the day before Judd threatened me in the cellar. Maybe I wasn't thinking straight. I should have told the police everything long before, but by then, I was in too deep. I'm going to stay with you. Silvana had never been more certain of anything. Ria shook her head. Stay with me tonight, and go back tomorrow. It won't be long before the police check the cellar. It will look odd if you're not there. I have every faith in your survival skills. Look how far you've come. In the meantime, there's something I want you to have. What is it? Ria handed Silvana 2 envelopes. Inside one is a plan of the cellar. After years of searching, I think I may have finally uncovered the sealed entrance to a tunnel leading to the old priory. My father was a historian and suspected there might be one near the shop. The other is a copy of my will. It's my final and dearest wish to make your life better when I've gone. Friday the 13th. The storm had been brewing all day. An ominous black sky that only got darker as the hours passed. Perfect for a Friday the 13th, especially one in October. Flynn and I had been working all day at Rewind Rentals, the shop busy with locals picking up horror films to fuel their spooky movie marathons. Upstairs, at the Rewind Theater, we'd been showing a lineup of old school classics. Freddy Krueger, Halloween, even The Company of Wolves for the hardcore fans. I was setting up the projector in the small, cozy theater room. A bowl of popcorn resting against my hip. The audience, mostly townies who liked the idea of watching horror movies in the vintage ambiance of the theater, settled into their worn velvet chairs with drinks, candy, and buttery popcorn. Flynn had put together a killer playlist for the pre-show, layering eerie sounds between trailers for other horror films. The first jump scare in Halloween was coming up, just as the weather outside began to turn nasty. A sudden, deafening crack of thunder echoed through the building. Lightning illuminated the theater windows, and everyone jumped in their seats, right on cue with the movie. I couldn't help but laugh, the timing too perfect to be planned. The storm had really picked up, pouring rain rattling against the windows. It made the dim lights in the shop downstairs flicker, which I only noticed as I left the theater and headed back down. Flynn had snuck off a little earlier, saying something about grabbing the next movie for the queue. I descended the creaky stairs, the hum of the old films playing through the walls. Just as I reached the last step, lightning flashed again, and the room went momentarily white, followed by a boom of thunder that seemed to shake the very floor beneath me. I shook my head, grinning to myself. Flynn loved Friday the 13th, especially one as dramatic as this. Flynn, I called out, stepping behind the counter to check the register, fully expecting him to pop out from some shadowy corner, and of course, he did. He timed it just as another bolt of lightning struck, diving out from behind a row of horror movies With a loud boo, I screamed, slapping his arm instinctively, and he burst into laughter, pulling me close before I could get away. His lips found mine in a soft, warm kiss. The contrast to the storm outside, making it feel all the more comforting. "You're too easy," Flynn teased, brushing his thumb over my cheek. Always so jumpy, I rolled my eyes, trying to ignore the way my pulse quickened. "Yeah, well, I have a reason to be, especially on nights like this. Something weird always happens on Friday the 13th. I'm starting to think I'm cursed." Flynn raised an eyebrow, that familiar smirk tugging at the corner of his lips. "Oh? And what makes you say that?" I sighed, stepping back and leaning against the counter as I crossed my arms, the rain tapping against the windows behind me. "Okay, so remember last year when I was doing the end-of-day paperwork behind the desk?" He nodded, waiting for me to continue. I looked up, and there was this guy standing by the horror section, I said, feeling a little chill run down my spine at the memory. He was wearing this creepy mask, like one of those old porcelain doll faces, and just staring at me. Flynn's grin faded, his expression shifting from amused to something more serious. "Wait, what? Who was he?" "That's the thing. I don't know. I didn't hear the bell ring when he came in, and when I greeted him, he didn't say anything. He just kept watching me while he browsed the shelves." "Okay, that's seriously messed up," Flynn said, taking a step closer. "What happened after?" "Well, I kept trying to act normal, you know? Like maybe he was just one of those weird horror buffs who gets really into it." I shrugged, feeling the goosebumps rise on my arms. But then he was just gone. No bell, no nothing. One second he was there, the next he wasn't. "Jesus, Amelia, that's creepy as hell," Flynn muttered, looking around as if expecting to see someone lurking in the shadows. "What the hell is wrong with people? Coral Cove is supposed to be safe." "Yeah, well, that's what I thought too. But every Friday the 13th, something strange happens." I glanced over at the old TV sets lining the back wall, one of them flickering ominously, as if the storm outside had seeped into the electronics. Flynn shook his head. "That's insane. Did you ever find out who it was?" "Nope. Never saw him again," I replied, my voice softer now. "I even checked the cameras, but nothing." Flynn stared at me for a moment, clearly freaked out by the story. Before he could say anything else, another loud clap of thunder boomed through the shop, making the old bells on the door chime, just as the lightning flashed again. I froze for a split second, watching the window, and Flynn turned to look at the door. When he glanced back at me, his eyes widened, and he took a step back. Flynn let out a yell, nearly tripping over the counter stool in his panic. I couldn't help it. I burst into laughter. I had slipped on the same creepy mask from the back room, the one we kept for Halloween decorations. "You should have seen your face," I howled, tears of laughter streaming down my cheeks as I pulled the mask off. "Priceless!" Flynn clutched his chest, breathing heavily before shaking his head at me. "You're a menace," he said, stepping forward and wrapping his arms around me. "And I don't know why I put up with you," I grinned, tilting my head up to meet his gaze. "Because you love me," I teased. He rolled his eyes, but leaned down to kiss me again. The storm outside, a distant rumble compared to the warmth between us. "Yeah, I do," he murmured, pulling me closer. The rain kept falling. The thunder rolled. And in that small, cozy corner of Coral Cove, surrounded by dusty VHS tapes and flickering lights, we felt untouchable, no matter how cursed the night might be. Kaala, the de Havilland, twin otter charter plane, shuddered through gray clouds as its mouthy pilot wrestled with the controls, navigating toward the barely visible landing strip ahead. Like the plane's humming engines, the bearded Inuit's mouth hadn't stopped buzzing since we'd taken off from Iqaluit 3 hours before, and my tolerance for both noises had grown slim. Happily, the end of this ordeal was in sight. The small hamlet Mitimatalik, known as Pond Inlet, which we were rocking and tilting down towards. From this vantage point, and in this dawn-greeting, sleet-spitting weather, the village at the northernmost tip of Baffin Island appeared little more than a shadowy cluster of shacks dwarfed by glaciers in the distance. It looked every bit the town at the end of the world it was, and exactly the kind of place you'd find someone like her. "I'm just saying," the pilot continued, having received approval to land. "I get it, the dating world's tough, but coming all the way to Mitimatalik for a woman? All she wants is a ticket out of this dump. No amount of hot flesh on a cold night is worth being taken for a ride." I forced another smile, though my lips were resistant, watching the landing strip lights glow brighter. "Like I said, she's got a wonderful personality," I said, for the 15th time. "You don't have to worry. Not everyone's a scammer, spoken like a love-struck fool with more money than sense." The pilot laughed. "Well, I hope it goes okay. At least you've got your return flight booked. I'll be back tomorrow, same time. But if you're not here, with or without your girl, I'll be gone. No refunds." I nodded, staring out at the endless expanse of snow that had become visible as dawn broke. Calling it dawn at 10 to noon seemed wrong, but that's what it was this time of year, during Nunavut's polar night, when the sun barely rose above the horizon, and daylight, more twilight, didn't last long. A 1 to 2 hour period of faint light that quickly retreated to darkness. It suited me fine, because it suited Kaala, December 5th. The body of 35-year-old Naki Pakta is discovered in Rankin Inlet, Kivalik, having bled out from multiple stab wounds. The nature of the injuries is baffling. The star-shaped structure of the wounds suggests they were inflicted from within. No murder weapon is found. No persons of interest are identified. Naki is found in a remote area outside the town, half buried in a mat of Arctic heather. Kaala wasn't my online girlfriend, or the catfish the pilot suspected. That was a convenient lie. This time tomorrow, he'd either laugh at me or pat me on the back, depending on how things went. Both eventualities were covered. The plane convulsed as we landed, tires skidding briefly before finding their grip. Then we came to a halt at the terminal, a corrugated outhouse set against a dull, hazy backdrop. "Here we are," he said, grinning through his beard. "Good luck with your woman. You'll need it." I thanked him and disembarked with backpack and camera. The biting cold stabbed me, but I didn't flinch. I inhaled sharply, the icy air burning my lungs, and made my way deeper into the ghost-like outpost of swirling snowflakes, the most remote place I'd ever come to meet a subject. Beyond the airstrip, the snow-covered streets of Mitimatalik were deserted. Dim street lamps illuminated squat, weather-beaten buildings, wide-eyed structures that seemed to huddle together to keep warm and endure the endless night, which had introduced insomnia, sleep paralysis, and nightmares to their eaves. December 10th. Aputi Kanuk, 38, is discovered in his pickup in Whale Cove. The insides of the cab are painted red. Police are baffled. The Inuit sports hundreds of wounds, pinpricks that seem to have punctured the flesh from within. There is nothing untoward in the vehicle, just some strands of heather in the footwell. I passed residences with lights glowing in windows, stores hibernating like frost-covered monuments, and vehicles remade as ice sculptures. I didn't pass people, even though it was midday and as bright as it was going to be for another 24 hours. Nobody was getting their steps in. But that's not to say no one was out. As the snowfall grew thicker and I approached a junction in the road, laughter reached my ears from my destination, Ukpik Tavern, where, according to Sigil, the woman I was seeking should be. A few more steps, and it materialized. A nondescript bar that doubled as a restaurant, dull light spilling through the window. A wooden sign above the door creaked as I pushed through. Inside, I took a moment to shake off the cold and the snow before making my way to a table. The bar was decorated simply, with wooden tables and chairs, and a fireplace burning thick logs. A handful of locals were seated, meeting friends for lunch during this nighttime reprieve. They eyed me with mild suspicion as I came in. I made a show of checking my camera and placing it on the table like it was sacred. They looked away. Just another rich tourist or hipster blogger come to photograph the northern lights. Boring. A barman with a ducktail beard that somehow looked better than mine sauntered over as I shrugged off my parka. He informed me the bar was closing at 1:30, an hour and a bit from now. He noted my Nikon and the guidebook for neighboring Bylot Island I'd placed on the table. He didn't ask why I was here. I ordered beer and a bowl of caribou stew, then settled down to warm myself and wait. I didn't have to wait long. She came out of the men's room, carrying a mop and bucket, head high as she went behind the bar. The information I'd received had been correct. Not that I doubted it. Sigil was always correct. And though she looked older than 40 and heavier than 180 pounds, she was recognizable as the person who'd been described. Her face was weather-beaten. Strands of gray threaded her braided hair, and the birthmark on her neck was visible above the folds of her jumper. It was her, December 15th. Panic spreads through the Kivalik region as a third body is found. The frozen corpse of Nuvuk Kayuk, 42, is discovered at the foot of a cliff in Chesterfield. It seems he may be the victim of a fall, until he is thawed out and the stab wounds appear. Multiple star-shaped incisions that confirm murder, but there are no clues to be found, except the cluster of heather in his grasp. I received my glass of amber liquid and bowl of meat and veg, which I ate and drank slowly, watching her interact with the locals. She had an infectious laugh and a warm voice. I gathered she'd worked here a while. She seemed kind, not like one who could hurt another. But appearances are deceptive. I knew that better than most. Time crawled as I finished eating. Every so often, she'd look in my direction, flash a smile or nod, and I'd look away. I didn't need to make a connection. Not yet. Shortly after 1:15, the locals started getting up to leave. I drained my glass and pulled on my coat. It had been a successful visit. I'd found who I was looking for and gotten a feel for her form. Despite her slight bulk, there was no question she could handle herself. Behind the smiles and laughs, she could wield violence. I paid my bill and left. Outside, it was already black, the brief daylight hours having retreated. The snowfall had ceased, as if scared back into hiding by the night. Pond Inlet was silent, except for the now muted voices of the locals, who slunk out of the tavern behind me, showing less than zero interest in this photo-hunting fool. Stepping onto the stoop of what appeared to be a post office, I took cover in the shadows and fished out my vape. blood, orange, and charcoal. My flavor of choice. Enough bite to keep me alert, though, of course, I had sigil for that. And as if on cue, to remind or reprimand me, a sudden cackle of noise penetrated my ear, making me wince as I cupped it. It was a garbled message, like always, broken syllables that were difficult to understand, but whose meaning was clear. I was on the right track, and things were escalating. Kaala was about to strike again. December 21st. The remote community of Arctic Bay, Qikiqtaaluk, is shaken by the discovery of Panaa Pictou, 39, found dead while camping on the outskirts of town. Her body, exsanguinated, sports familiar stab wounds. A charred stem of heather is found in her campfire's ashes. 4 Inuit are dead, killed in mysterious fashion. The killer remains at large. I'd taken the 3rd pull on my vape when the bar door opened and my target stepped out, wrapped in a sealskin coat. I couldn't see her face, but I knew from her gait it was her. She didn't waste time, stomping off towards the far end of town, where the street lamps petered out and darkness reigned. I gave her a minute's head start. The snow would record her path. She wasn't expecting me, so she wouldn't try to give me the slip. I took another drag and waited for the barman to lock up before setting off. I activated my Nikon's night vision function and kept an eye on its view screen as I followed her tracks. The buildings thinned out as I left town until there was nothing left but rocks and snow. Somewhere ahead was a forest, but I couldn't make it out. What I could make out was a flat, oblong structure surrounded by a chain link fence. I didn't know what the building was, but the footprints led to it. So that's where I went. A hole had been cut in the fence, spliced wires bent back. I ducked to slip through the gap, careful not to snag my Canada Goose parka, then slunk through the snow to the building. What I could now guess was some kind of supply station. It was abandoned, at least for the winter, but its door had been forced to admit 1 guest. 2, as I eased it open. 3, if Kaala's trap had already been set. I winced in anticipation of a squeal. It didn't come, and I was able to enter a cluttered office lit by a battery-powered lantern. Empty crates and barrels filled the space. Paperwork lay scattered on the floor. In one corner was a sleeping bag, a rucksack, and a small heater. A sealskin coat lay next to the heater, which had been plugged in and was starting to glow. Clever. This wasn't her home. She was using this place as a lure. A crash and a yell brought my eyes to the door behind a dusty reception, and I started towards it, depositing my camera on the desk. Thought you could sneak up on me, eh? Thought you could take me like the others? A thud, a cry, a slam. I reached the door which was slightly ajar, and peered through. I knew you'd find me, you bitch. But guess what? I got ready. In my ear, Sigil was humming, spitting instructions in urgent, guttural tones. I winced and ignored. I knew what to do. Like Twinak Itukalak, I was ready. So I pulled open the door and stepped through. It was a large storage area, illuminated by more lanterns on aluminium shelving units that had been rearranged haphazardly. The shelves, which were presumably used to store produce in normal times, now displayed nothing but flowers, lots of flowers, potted and in full bloom, which was odd because of the season and because of what Sigil told me to bring. Killed Nuvuk, killed Panna. Now I'll kill you. For real this time. The words accompanied more thumps and cries, and then something else, an unnatural keening. I peered around one of the shelving units and found the source of the noise. Jovial, happy Twinak from the bar, straddling the Inuit Kaala, slamming her head against the floor as she tried to sing a song. A window on the opposite wall was up. That's how Kaala had entered. Seeing the flowers would have made her feel safe, given her confidence, inspired bravado. Of course, that's how Twinak had made ready. A second glance at the nearest flower confirmed it. All the potted plants in here were plastic. Shut up, witch. There's nothing here you can use. Twinak slammed Kaala's head harder. The dark-haired, younger woman's words faltered, but she quickly resumed her bird-like song, an eerie, chirping sound that made me shiver. Twinak's back was to me. Kaala's eyes found me as I shucked off my bag. She was surprised, but didn't react. I could see in her eyes she was broken. I could see in her face she was weak. She'd been trekking for weeks through darkness, making her way up from Tukik, stopping at townships on the way. This was her last stop, but she was tired, hungry. The net was closing in, and she'd underestimated the last of her prey. I'd come to help. Hey, I said, startling Twinak as I unzipped my bag. Haven't you hurt her enough? Who the fuck? Your turn. I removed a potted plant of Arctic heather, real, not plastic, from my bag and put it on the floor, then kicked it towards the barmaid with my foot. Twinak's eyes went wide. Kaala's fluttered shut, but her cracked lips continued to warble. Stop! Twinak spat, falling away from the plant. I watched as its leaves began to tremble in response to the quickening of Kaala's song. In my time and profession, in the circles I traveled, and amongst the fiends I called my crew, I'd seen my share of weird shit. But I'd never seen anything like this. I'd never known an animist, someone who could control earthy matter with their voice. So this was one for the books. Kaala's eyes snapped open, and as she started to sing, shout her words, the plant reacted. Its stems lengthened, stretching toward Twinak like snakes. The soft leaves twisted and hardened, curling into deadly thorns. The petals flared, exposing a dark, pulsing core. Twinak tried to flee, but the heather was fast. Thorny stems wrapped around her limbs, pulling her down. The more she struggled, the tighter they constricted. Kaala sat up and sang louder, and the heather responded. Vines forced their way into Twinak's mouth, grew down her throat, muffling her screams as they choked her. I watched as she convulsed, thorns punching out through her throat. She squeezed her eyes shut against probing stems, but that was the least of her worries. I couldn't see what was happening inside her clothes, but the pool of blood seeping out from under her back told the tale. I stood there and watched for several minutes until she stopped moving and Kaala fell silent. Her animist hymn at an end, she collapsed in a heap, fully spent. I went to her, sat behind her, eased her close. She didn't object. She didn't fear me. It was always the way. They could trust me. They knew. I wasn't there to harm them or turn them in. It was the aura of Sigil. They knew I was only there to help, as blood-covered stems of heather slid from Twinak's mouth. Thorns returned to leaves, and petals drooped. I cradled Kaala in my arms. "It's okay," I said, allowing a slug-like tentacle to exit my ear. "My name is Bertram Belasco. I was alerted to your existence when you took your third victim. I run a network dedicated to supporting people like you. Serial killers, for want of a better term. The Mounties haven't pieced things together, but they'll find you. I can get you out. I have a passport for you in my bag, and flights are booked. I can take you to the States. But you have to agree. Do you agree, Kaala Piak? Will you join my network and kill for me?" Sometimes they thought about it, weighed the pros and cons, took time to make sure I was legit. Kaala didn't. She was in no state, and she didn't care. She simply nodded, eyelids flickering. It's all Sigil needed. It wriggled its tentacle to her throat, slid out a proboscis, and stabbed her. For a moment, Kaala's eyes widened in shock. Then, as quickly as it had struck, the tentacle retracted and slunk back inside my ear, having deposited a small lump of matter under her skin, coating her, making her his, ours, a member of the SK network, in which, as an animist, she'd excel. The world was going to become that bit more deadly, and the craving my master had would be fulfilled. November 28th. The peaceful life of Kaala Piak comes to an end when 5 friends visit her guest house in Tukik. Initially friendly, their true intentions emerge when they reveal they've seen a video online. Footage secretly recorded by a hiker showing Kaala performing animism. Desperate to create a viral video, they pressure her to perform and make them famous. She refuses, and the confrontation turns dark. Threatened with violence, Kaala reveals the Eskimo magic she was born with, using a houseplant in self-defense. It starts to strangle Nuvok. His friends hit her over the head to stop the act. Panicked, thinking her dead, they throw her from a cliff to hide their crime. Kaala awakes mid-fall and sings for help. Arctic Heather, at the base of the cliff, answers the call. Her animism, now tainted, has a taste for revenge, and she has the names of 5 who can satisfy it. Guilty Party. 2.5 hours after touching down in Innsbruck and boarding the SUV that waited to greet her, Amelia Carver's overnight expedition came to an end at a squat, crumbling structure in the rugged terrain of Samonatal Valley, from Dublin to Austria to Liechtenstein, from 12 a.m. to 6. From civilization to desolation. And she still didn't know if it was worth it. Looking at the building, little more than an abandoned mound of concrete, it was difficult to see how it could be. She hadn't accomplished anything of note since last year. She wasn't expecting to receive any awards. There were no contemporaries she still wanted to meet, and even if, by some chance, she was to be acknowledged for her endeavors, she had no desire to receive a tacky statue. Not that it mattered. She was contracted to be here, so she was. At least this year promised to be different, since Bertram was introducing something new, and she'd made her own assumptions about what that meant. A special guest, an unexpected attendee, one that would be worth turning up for, if it was him. "So now, you're not gonna throw me a bone?" she asked the driver, as he stopped by the secret military installation, which has been constructed by Nazi forces during World War II. Not so much as a nod or shake of the head. The driver, mannequin-like in black suit and mirrored sunglasses, said precisely as many words as he'd said since collecting her at the airport. A sum total of 0. "Cool," said his fare, adjusting the Venetian half-mask that covered the left of her face before popping the passenger door, the fabric of her crimson gown rustling as she got out. "Good talk. Thanks for the riveting repartee." Out of the vehicle, in the pale morning light, Amelia shut the door and straightened her skirt. Gravel spat like an angry rattlesnake as the driver stomped the gas and crunched away. "Rude," said Amelia, tottering on heels towards the entrance, a rusted steel door partially concealed by tangled vines. Exactly the kind of place she wanted to spend the first evening of the last month of the year, when she could be curled up watching TV. But here she was, pushing through a squealing slab of history to meet another expressionless brute, who was as conversational as the one who'd dropped her off. "Hey," she said, as the passage she'd entered closed around her. Am I last again? I'm always late. Shucks. The grunt showed no emotion while placing a barcode scanner type device against the scar on her neck, allowing a beep to confirm her identity. While he did this, she removed her phone from her clutch and tapped on it to display the invite she'd received, which was also scanned and accepted. Once done, the guard stepped aside, allowing her access to a drape-covered door. Thanks, Amelia said, maintaining eye contact with the goon while adjusting her breasts. So, is it true? Is it abyss? No response. The bouncer flicked his eyes back to the wall. Amelia sighed and pulled the drape aside, stepping into a better lit chamber that she lost sight of immediately when a pair of calloused hands fell over her eyes. Guess who? Came a gravelly voice, laced with playful menace. Amelia peeled the hands away and turned to face their owner. A beast of a man wearing jeans, a white cotton waistcoat, and a wolf's head mask. Blue eyes stared from its sockets, his lips curled up within its maw. Wolf Claw, always a pleasure. Of all the associates she'd met since joining the network, Wolf Claw was the one she liked most. He had a sense of humor to go with his violent nature and was capable of faking social niceties. Carver, he greeted. Thought it was you I heard coming in behind me, looking pasty as ever. Still not getting any sun? Still got the same machete? Amelia asked, peering over his shoulder at the curved weapon strapped to his back. Thought it might have broke from overuse. Heard it's taken 30 heads this year. Not jealous. Old Betsy's stronger than she looks. The masked man grinned. What about you? I remember you saying last year how your kill count was too low. Any success ramping things up? In Ireland, not as much as I'd like, she said, rolling her visible eye, the taped-up hole of her masquerade mask concealing the empty socket of the other. Came in with a solid 13, 3 more than last year, but shy of the 20 I wanted. An improvement is an improvement, and you are a more discerning kind of killer. Targeting assholes who mock the less fortunate and lack empathy is a task in and of itself. Unless you're starting to feel less philanthropic. Nope. Amelia shook her head, turning away from the wolf-headed killer. If I'm compelled to get my hands dirty, may as well clean some shit up. Anyway, never mind that. We better grab seats if there's any left. Bertram starts on time, and we're late. The interior of the chamber had been prepared for Bertram's event. Rows of chairs arranged before a makeshift stage holding a podium. Spotlights casting shadows on red curtained walls. The seats were occupied by figures in various states, some in their work clothes, boiler suits, leather aprons, lab coats, military fatigues. Others in more casual attire, some sporting face coverings, canvas bags, chrome constructions, cliched hockey masks, or things that had been assembled from strips of flesh. Some displaying faces not even mothers could love, but all unmistakably killers. "Indeed," said Wolfclaw, following Amelia towards the front, where she'd spotted a pair of vacant seats. "Wouldn't do to be kicked out when I'm in with a chance of best massacre. You deserve an award for that." Amelia nodded. "Speaking of awards, I guess you heard about the new one?" Wolfclaw said, turning into the front row behind her. "Lifetime Achievement Award. Arguably long overdue for a ceremony that honors psycho killers. Fuckers are near immortal. The question is, who's the inaugural recipient?" Amelia finished, nodding at the motley crew of weird and wonderful murderers she passed as she made her way to a seat. "You know what they've been saying on Instagram?" "Well, it's got to be Abyss," Wolfclaw said, taking a seat alongside her. "How many times did he win Killer of the Year? 12? Does anyone have a better record? Not only that. Best dismemberment, most depraved violation, goriest cut, you name it, he got it. Every year for a decade, until he vanished. He's the GOAT. Would be an insult to give it to anyone else. The question is he alive? All the rumors that circulate about him being locked away by the government, retiring to live as a lumberjack, being turned into mints by a final girl. Fuck, Wolfclaw gasped as she organized her dress on her chair. "I know, the ultimate humiliation for serial slashers." "Not that," Wolfclaw interrupted, touching her arm. "That." Amelia followed his gaze to the left of the stage, where 3 men stood partially obscured behind curtains. 2 of Bertram's goons, and him, clad in an oil-stained pair of overalls, feet stuffed into boots that were coming apart, head concealed by a latex S&M hood, replete with zips, straps, and buckles. The 7-foot-tall, hulking form was unmistakably Abyss. The shifting, awkward posture, the way his arms flexed, the movement of his head, glitching like stop-motion animation. She'd only seen videos, but she knew it was him. Wolfclaw was squinting behind his mask as he studied the granddaddy of killers. "He's bulkier than I expected, taller. But look how they're restraining him. Is that a neck manacle connected to prods?" Amelia had noticed this too. But before she could consider it, the lights dimmed and the piped music came to a halt. A hush fell over the crowd, and all eyes went to the stage as the curtain on the right was thrown back, allowing a bearded man in a suit to stride out, beckoning applause, which he got in buckets from all, because this was their benefactor, Bertram Belasco, long-serving head of the serial killer network. Amelia took part in the adulation as he soaked it up. In the 5 years since he found her and signed her up to his club, she'd come to respect him like everyone else. Being selected was nothing short of an honor. It meant her killer credentials were on point. It meant, despite the exorbitant subscription fee Bertram charged for membership, that she had access to all SK network resources: anonymity, medical aid, protection, and sanctuary when required. Luckily, she hadn't needed to avail of much yet, being a small fish in the pond. A little treatment for wounds, some hacking to remove her image from CCTV footage. All in a day's work for the network. "Welcome, friends," Bertram said when the applause died down. "Delighted to see you all again. Our venue is a little less luxurious than usual, but there's a reason for that. One that will become clear soon. Before we start, I want to take a moment to say that this year's nominees for our various awards were highly impressive. Kill of the Year, Sickest Mutilation, Most Creative Execution. You've outdone yourselves, and I want to congratulate everyone for their efforts. You've made me proud, and, well, just well done." "Weird start," Wolfclaw whispered, and Amelia nodded. Bertram seemed more somber than usual. "However," he blurted then, perking up as his eyes went to Abyss. "Before we get to that," a surprise, a murmur rippled through the crowd, and Amelia felt goosebumps on her arms. "As you know from my invite," their host went on, "we have a special award tonight. And along with it comes a special guest. There's been a lot of speculation online as to who it might be, with one particular name being mooted more than others. Well, I don't want to keep you or him waiting any longer, so let's kick things off with our first ever Lifetime Achievement Award. Won't you join me, please, in welcoming Abyss?" Applause filled the room as Abyss was guided out by the goons. His footsteps as he stomped to the podium were louder than the chants and cheers around her. But why was he secured like that? Was he here against his will? Was he a danger to his own kind? "I know this looks weird," said Bertram, as Abyss was brought to a halt alongside him, quivering as though volts flowed into his neck. But sadly, dear Abyss is not the force of nature he used to be. He's had to keep a low profile these last 10 years. 2 decades as the world's most prolific serial killer is something that can take a toll. He absorbed more pure guilt than anyone before him, and handled it like a trooper. But there's a limit to all things, and 10 years ago today, he reached his. He had to be put away for everyone's safety. Just one more kill would have broken him, released the guilt, and we weren't ready. "What's he talking about?" Wolfclaw hissed. Amelia shook her head. She had no idea, but whatever it was, it had the potential to be epic. As he spoke, Bertram retrieved an award from behind the podium. A grotesque creation made of twisted steel for you, he continued, presenting the award to the monster. With gratitude. But this isn't your true reward. A polished lump of metal in your hands is nothing but a weapon. I know what you'd really like is closure. Abyss closed his fist around the award, gripping it like a bludgeon, while Bertram raised an arm and clicked his fingers. Amelia sat up in her chair, watching the curtains at the back of the stage part, and another suited mook wheel out a crate. "This is different," said Wolfclaw. "What's the old boy up to? Does everyone remember Diamond Lagoon, 1995? Abyss's most infamous rampage. He took out an entire settlement in one night. An incredible feat of savagery. 67 residents, 66 victims, because one slipped through the net. A plucky young girl. Don't you hate them? We've all been frustrated by one of those. For Abyss, though, in a 20-year reign of terror, she was the only one who ever got away. The only blemish in an otherwise spotless career. And guess what? Bertram moved to the edge of the stage as his man undid latches on the crate. "We have her here tonight." Gasps in the crowd as the guard opened the box and a disheveled woman fell out, barely getting her hands in front of her before hitting the floor. Her face was lined with age. Her hair was gray. She whimpered where she'd landed by Abyss, whose head was turned down as he watched. "No way," Amelia said, as Bertram and his goons walked off the stage. "Are we going to see a live kill?" "You're free, Abyss," Bertram called as he slipped through the curtains. "Let it go." The crowd had gotten to their feet, and Amelia joined them, all eyes on the scene, keen to see what would happen next. And what happened next was like watching a movie sped up. 2x, Abyss threw his head back and howled. The woman screamed up at his hood. Abyss drove the trophy into her skull. The onlookers in the crowd cheered and jumped. Amelia's mouth fell open. Wolfclaw whistled. Abyss turned to the crowd and started to shudder. Not from being electrocuted, from something else. What was it Bertram had said? Amelia wondered. One more kill would have broken him, released the guilt. The shuddering turned to convulsions, and Abyss roared. Not now in fury, but in pain. He staggered, his body shaking violently. His head jerked back, and with a sickening crack, it split open, ripping through latex and spilling blood and bone to the floor. 3x. Black mist poured from his mask. Smoky tendrils shot forth, snaking through the air and filling the room. Writhing, maleficent tentacles that multiplied and wriggled like worms before plunging into the heads of those below, squeezing screams from their lungs. Their bodies convulsed, and their faces contorted as the guilt from Abyss took control. Amelia watched chaos unfold, beginning with Wolfclaw. who stared wide-eyed in horror from his mask as he took his machete, lifted it to his neck, and sliced through. Hot, scarlet liquid splattered her face as she looked away, her eye falling on the killers behind her, who were turning their weapons on themselves, tearing at flesh, gouging out eyes, ripping their own jaws off in a frenzy. 4X, tendrils of mist withdrew from falling bodies, returned to the hovering mass over Abyss's corpse. Amelia tottered, unsteady, on heels slipping in blood. The screams were abating. The crowd was diminishing. Not many remained on their feet. Not many continued to be overwhelmed by the guilt of their actions, encouraged by the fingers of mist that had entered their brains. All of their brains, even hers. And that's when she realized she too had been invaded. But she, alone, was still standing, with a tendril of smoke connecting her to the pulsating mass, which was slowly drifting towards her from the stage. Drifting, oozing, throbbing, shrinking as it flowed into her head, filling her mind with images of her victims, bullies, narcissists, sociopaths, bigots, gaslighters, abusers, jerks. Am I supposed to feel bad for killing them? Her inner voice queried. Am I supposed to break under the weight of massive guilt? And that's when someone hit. Pause. I knew it would be you. A voice behind her, Bertram's, said, and she turned, the last of the guilt devouring her soul. Thought we'd have more time to nurture your talent, but Abyss's willpower was waning. He was going to release it soon, one last murder or not. And it needed to happen in a controlled environment. It needed to feast after being locked away for so long. And it needed to choose a new host. What is it? Amelia asked, aware of fresh darkness inside her. A force as old as time, Bertram said, taking her hand. An insatiable force that needs to be fed. But keeping it fed is not easy. And keeping it restrained, even harder. You see what it does when it's not. But it takes a certain kind of person. Abyss was that person before. 30 years he held it, a record. But it fucked him up. He was a discerning killer, too, once upon a time, an idealist. He focused his darkness, like you, till he was chosen. What have you done to me? I'm sorry, Bertram said, leading her away from the carnage. As its guardian, I have to oversee the transference. It's never easy, but it's necessary. I do it to keep the world safe, believe it or not. Safe from unstoppable evil. It picked you today because you could hold it. But it's going to change you over time. It will naturally make you more feral, less controlled. A rampaging beast, if I'm honest. But it will also make you a legend, the best of the best, with the guilty conscience fueling you. You'll be Killer of the Year for as long as you want. And the next Lifetime Achievement Award will be yours. Amelia's mind was racing. His words sounded insane, but she could feel it. A growing hunger that demanded to be sated. A hunger that would make her a queen. Then I suppose I have work to do, she said, her voice sharp like the switchblade in her clutch. Bertram nodded. And I've a new network to build. Welcome to your new life, Amelia Carver. Glad to be here, she replied, accepting a kiss to her hand. I look forward to carving a fresh abyss. Death in the White Room. In the White Room, always clean and full of light. Death had made itself at home. It lingered like an unwelcome guest, curling up in the dark recesses behind doors, or lying in wait beneath the bed's shallow. Its ghastly form remained unseen, its wheezing breaths unheard. Yet its presence was unmistakable, marked by the foul stench that clung to the air. It was a scent of old blood mingled with lye, and human refuse tinged with a sharp, lemony undertone. Arthur abhorred the lemon smell most of all. It was a poor parody of the fruit, all the sour and none of the sweet. They try to hide the nature of this place. Fresh paint over rotting wood, he said, his gaze drifting to the one dying beside him. The stranger was no more than a shadow of someone he once knew. A poor artist's rendition of his sister. Her skin, once golden and kissed by the sun, had turned pallid, marred with patches of purple. Her hair, once a rich brown, full of life and curls, had withered away to a handful of brittle wisps. Arthur had long forgotten the exact shade of his sister's eyes. Were they brown like mine? Or did they favor mother's green? He wondered, but could not recall. He could lean over this sleeping stranger's body, pry open an eye to see. But this was not his sister, as he would often lie to himself. Yet he was older now than when she first became sick. And this lie seemed harder to believe with each passing day. A nurse, the fat one with that little nose, spilled a bedpan in the corridor today, Arthur said, his voice low and bitter. Like flies drawn to shit, they swarmed over it to clean before I could see. But I did. Red. He clutched the cold hand of the stranger. White little flies. I want to pick the wings off them and watch them struggle. I want to... His words faltered as something arrested his speech. A subtle, almost imperceptible squeeze from the stranger's hand served to both soothe and silence him. The stranger was listening. Was it the cruelty I insinuated, or the profanity that stirred you for a moment? Stranger, Arthur said, a wicked little smile curving his lips, though his eyes remained wide and wanting. He watched her lids, hoping to see them open, to see her well again. Yet No such miracle could exist. Her eyelids remained heavy, puffy, and bruised. There is a bit of father in me, you know, he whispered. A nastiness. Arthur turned to his left, gazing out of the window at the dying day. A thick wall of cloud loomed just above the horizon. Its underbelly dyed a deep orange by the setting sun, while the tops blushed pink against the purple sky. A seagull had perched itself on the windowsill, its clueless yellow eyes peering in. Yet, to Arthur, those eyes seemed mocking. The bird seemed to taunt him in silence. I smell the air, fresh and clean, while you languish on your sister's slow death. With a sudden, powerful flap of its wings, the seagull took off. A small down feather drifted in, slipping through a crack in the window, landing softly by Arthur's feet. He bent down to pick it up, but even that slight disturbance of air sent it skittering away, disappearing into the shadows beneath the bed. It was dark under the bed, where the shadows coiled thick and heavy. Death slumbered there, a patient snake nestled in the tall grass, awaiting an unsuspecting foot to wander too close. Arthur felt the bite, the venom coursing through his veins, carried by the flow of his blood. Sleep claimed him soon after, and not a peaceful dream was had that night. The stranger sat perched on the window stool, fingers gently pawing at the glass, as if yearning to escape. Their white gown, soft and delicate, was adorned with 1,000 downy feathers. The moon outside shone as brightly as the midday sun, bathing the world in a clean, silver light. When the stranger turned to face Arthur, familiarity struck. His sister looked at him with knowing yellow eyes and a petulant pout on her full lips. "You should open the window," she said, her voice hollow. Arthur cleared his throat, his voice strained. "Your feathers are too small. They won't catch the wind. You would fall like a chick too eager to leave the nest." She offered a wan, knowing smile. "These aren't my wings, silly. My wings are there," she said, gesturing towards the darkness beneath the bed. "Tucked away in the shadow, you try so hard to ignore. Despite the smell I know your nose catches. Would you abandon me? Ride the clouds with death and mocking seabirds, while I remain tethered to the earth with Father." Bang, bang, the sound tore through the night, rattling the very bones of the world. The moon fled, hiding behind a curtain of dark clouds. The door at the far end of the room shuddered on its rusted hinges, each violent shake loosening it further. The wood was aged and sodden, swollen with damp that wept from the splintered cracks, leaking a slow, miserable drip. Bang! Again, the assault resumed. A fist of stone, a voice of thunder on the other side. The clouds had deepened to a menacing red, pouring rain and spitting lightning. Thunder rumbled across the land, shaking the earth and rattling the windows in their frames. "I cannot be your shelter any longer," she whispered, her voice frail and sickly. "I will breathe my last, and the storm will hunt you down. The rain, relentless as it has been to me through the years, will hammer at you with the same fury. See the shadow, and together we shall fly." "I am afraid," Arthur said. The stranger took Arthur's hand in hers as he drew near. "This is what a sister's hand is for," she said softly. "To hold and be free of fear." It was day, a bright blue day, with a sky unmarred by clouds, white or gray. The window stood wide open, allowing the fragrance of rain-kissed grass to drift in. Outside, far below, a throng of tiny white flies swarmed,